Hey guys, this is the review for the first test for Math 121. And we are going to start off with solving some equations. So the first one it looks like is, let's see, x squared minus 11x minus 42 equals 0. Off the top of my head, I feel like I need to change this from red. Sorry guys. I really like this purple color. Okay. I feel like this should be factorable. So what I'm going to do, because this coefficient is 1, the leading coefficient is 1, there's probably some numbers that multiply together to give me 42 and add up to a negative 42 and add up to be negative 11. So one number needs to be negative, one number needs to be positive, and the bigger number is going to be negative because they add up to be a negative number. So starting with 42, I know that 6 times 7 is 42, and if I make my bigger number negative, that is not going to add up to be negative 11. I know that 1 and 42, 2 and 21, 3 and 14. Is it 3 times 14? And 1 left over, 3 times 14. I think this is going to be the one. So positive 3, negative 14 multiplied together to be negative 42, and they add up to be negative 11. So what that means is I have x plus 3, parenthesis, x minus 14, but I haven't answered it. I have only factored it. Do not forget to actually solve the equation. I know this is equal to 0, so I still need to make it equal to 0. So x sub 1, my first answer is going to be negative 3. And x sub 2, my second answer is going to be positive 14, because positive 14 will make this 0 and negative 3 will make this 0. So two answers. The graph, the sketch of this would probably look like, let's see, negative 3, positive 14, and it's positive, so it's going to look something like this, you guys, not exactly like this, okay? All right, so that is using by solving. The next one, I'm going to factor it too, but before I factor it, I'm going to do this. So it is 2x squared minus 10x plus 12 equals 0. I noticed that 2, 10, and 12 are each divisible by 2, and this will make the factoring a little bit easier. Then I have x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. This way I don't have to multiply the 2 by the 12 first to do my factoring. This 2 is just going to stay out here. But I am looking for two numbers that multiply together to be 6, add up, positive 6, add up to be negative 5. And I think that's going to be two negatives, x minus 2 and x minus 3 is equal to 0. So my answers are, this 2 doesn't matter out here because if I multiply it by 0, it's still going to be 0. So x sub 1 is going to be equal to positive 2, and x sub 2 is going to be equal to positive 3. All right, what do we got next? Oh, the next one is just the difference of squares. So we have x squared minus 25 equals 0. Because x squared is just x times x, and 25 is just 5 times 5, and we're subtracting, we're going to get x plus 5 times x minus 5. So x sub 1 is going to be negative 5. X sub 2 is going to be positive 5 to solve that. All right. Number 4. These are easy. That's why I like this. This is kind of part of completing the square, the last easy part of completing the square. If I only have one side and everything on it is being squared, if I just take the square root of both sides, I get x plus 3 is equal to positive and negative square root of 8, and then subtract 3 from both sides. So x is equal to positive and negative square root 8 minus 3. I can simplify this because the square root of 8 is the same thing as the square root of 4 times 2. And since 4 has a square root, it's just 2. We get 2 root 2. So x sub 1 is going to be positive 2 root 2 minus 3. And x sub 2 is going to be negative 2 root 2 minus 3. All right, what is next? We have 3x squared plus 11x plus 10 equals 0. So let's see if this is factorable or if we're going to need to use the quadratic formula. Remember, if our leading coefficient is not 1, we're going to need to multiply that by the constant there. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply together to be positive, whoops, not 300, positive 30, and add up to be the middle, still 11. So let's factor 30. 30 is 1 times 30, or 2 times 15, or 3 times 10, 3, 4, 5, 5 times 6. I think that's the one, you guys. I think it's 5 times 6 is 30, and 5 plus 6 is 11. So it's going to be 5 and 6. So we have to factor this by grouping. When we do that, we have to factor by grouping. So I'm going to change this to 3x squared plus, and I'm going to break the 11 x's into those two numbers. And I'm going to start with the 6x because I know that 6 and 3 share a factor. It's going to be easier this way. And 6 plus 5x plus 10 equals 0. So now I'm going to kind of group these together and group these together and say I can take out 3x's here, and I have x plus 2 plus 5 here, and I'm going to get x plus 2. And I know this has worked out correctly because these are equal to each other. These are the same, which means I can now factor that out. So now I'm going to say I have x plus 2, and then let's change colors up here. What do I have left over? I have 3x plus 5. So in factored form, it's going to be this. Then I just solve it the same way. To make this 0, x sub 1 is going to be negative 2. This is a little bit harder. I actually need to solve 3x plus 5 equals 0, so 3x equals negative 5. Some of you can do this in your head, but I'll just do it out. Negative 5/3, so x sub 2 is going to be negative 5/3. All right, where are we at? Okay, 4x squared minus 4x minus 15. What I am going to do here, since 4x squared and 4x both have a 4 in it, I'm going to complete the square. So I'm going to say, I'm going to go ahead and move the 15 to the other side. Positive 15, sorry, equals positive 15. And on this side, remember, you can only complete the square if the leading coefficient is a 1, but I can make that leading coefficient a 1 by factoring out this 4x plus, leave a space, parenthesis, equals 15. Now I'm going to take half of this number, which is just 0.5, and then I'm going to square that, and I'm going to get, I want to say 0.25, okay, and let me erase this, is going to drive me nuts here, okay, what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. But technically, you guys, I have not just added, and actually, maybe I'm going to write 0.25 as 1/4, actually. 1/4. Okay. I haven't just added 1/4. I've added 1/4 times 4, right? So I've added an entire 1 whole. So what I have to do to this side is add an entire whole. And then this is going to be 4 times. And when I factor this, when I factor this, two numbers that add up to be 1 and multiply together to be 1/4 is going to be half. So I have x plus 1/2 squared equals 16. Now to solve, divide both sides by 4. So I'm still going to have x plus 1/2 squared equals 16 divided by 4 is just 4, right? Yeah. Then I'm going to square both sides. So now I have x plus 1/2 is equal to positive and negative. Take the square root, I meant, you guys. Positive and negative 2. And then subtract 1/2. So x sub 1 is going to be positive 2 minus 1/2, or 1.5, or 3/2. Double check my math, I'm doing this all mentally. And x sub 2 is going to be negative 2 minus 1/2, which is negative 2 and 1/2, or negative 5/2. All right, what's next? Oh, solving rational. So actually, I'm going to stop here since this was the first set of problems and it was all quadratics. And I'll do the next set, which is all rational functions with one video.